So you're going to hear a number of the recurring themes from this stream for me today. And, you know, the circular economy is particularly exciting because this is where we take this conversation into the realm of opportunity. It's about jobs, it's about economic benefit, and it's about addressing unmet social need. My name's Esther, and since about 2012, I've been working on improving the waste outcomes from office refurbishments and their strip-out process. And we've had some reasonable successes, and I'm here to share those with you and ask you to get involved. So, newsflash, it really does take a team to solve a 55,000-ton waste problem. And the partnerships that we operate through really need a whole heap of different stakeholders to reach out and to do things differently and to take some risks. When we first started this project, the waste that was coming out from office refurbishments was actually quite hidden, because sometimes it's categorized as C&I waste, sometimes it's C&D, sometimes it belongs to the building owner through the make good process, sometimes it's the tenant, and sometimes the intermediary. So actually finding a point of truth to go to kind of get an indicator of the scale of the problem was quite challenging in itself. 55,000 tonnes is the number that we think is coming out of commercial buildings in the city of Sydney alone. That's 26 square kilometres of one of our major cities. But that is not a national number. We don't know what the national number is, but it's certainly very considerable. And when you come to look at the problem, what you need to think about it at a number of different levels. This is a contractual issue, it's an operational issue, and it's also about the articulation of vision. Fortunately, that's the reason that my programme exists. The Better Buildings Partnership looks to tackle these problems at scale. It's funded by the City of Sydney and operates predominantly inside our local government area, but I work with building owners who own property portfolios across Australia. And really what we seek to do is to generate best practice and resources that can be picked up across multiple sectors and across multiple locations. We use what they call the collective impact model, which is about where the private sector works with the public sector. They set a common vision. My council provides secretariat services to keep, the conversation bobbing along. And we commit to that shared flag on the hill, and then we set programs to address those things. And the power in that is about speaking with one voice. When each of those people go to the market and ask for something that's kind of similar, kind of different, you don't get momentum. When you get a consistency of voice, then suddenly people start to sit up and take notice. So who are we? There are 11 commercial landlords in the partnership, so think Stockland, AMP, Lendlease, Investor, Mirvac. We work with the property managers, so JLLs, CBRE, Colliers, and we've got 2 universities as well, so the University of Sydney and UTS. And then we partner with government. We have a very active relationship with the Office of Environment and Heritage. And absolutely critical for the success of this project has been the support of the EPA and their Circulate programme, which funded Edge Environment to provide some really important on-ground services for this. I think what's really clear is that when you're building these ecosystems, you need the big vision, but you also just need resources to fine-grain it and solve problems, because every time you lift up a stone, there's something else that just needs to be worked through. And so I absolutely commend the EPA for their commitment in this space, and this project would not have happened without their support. So what's our process? Very similar to the things we've heard from Samantha. It's really just about getting people sat down to a table and starting to unpick it. There is absolutely no shortage of great intentions. Really what you need to do is understand where in the process those things fail. So, for example, if you sit down at the table with all the people who are involved in the DFIT process, so you've got lawyers, you've got refurbishment specialists, you've got owners, you've got the demo contractors. They all want to maximise the resource recovery. And quite often those spaces will sit there with the tenant really knowing they're going to go for a year. And they argy-barge about how the make-good process is going to work and what the number's going to be, and and nothing really happens. And then at some point, the chain of custody is handed over, and then there's this incredible urgency, and all of that material has to leave the building within 24 hours, 48 hours, in one lift, overnight, into a loading dock where they've been allocated one parking space. And then you wonder why you're not getting the recovery that you could, as if you were having a systematic conversation and sending signals all the way through that process, then people could make plans, people could deliver a vastly improved result. So understanding where those points of failure occur was absolutely critical to this process, and that's been, I guess, the really big epiphany and the need to just really get down into the weeds and understand those pain points from the perspective of the people who are facing them. And mostly those are unintended consequences, and once you've found them, solving them is actually not too difficult. The scale of this problem is, could be vastly more impactful than the operational waste that comes out of these buildings. So as I said before, we need to do some more work on those numbers, but I think there are strong indicators that refurbishment waste could be 4 times greater than operational waste. When a tenancy moves space, that's about every 7 to 10 years is the average commercial lease. For every 1,000 square meters, about 63 tons of material is removed. Some of it has commodity recovery pathways, so you've got your glass, you've got your metal, gyprocks having a little bit of a better recovery processes now, and they need supporting, but they're there. Some of them need incubation, so there's been a lot of talk about carpet tiles and ceiling tiles, and some of those manufacturers have take-back programs. We can argue about how effective they are, but if we provide that demand, then we can support those, and the seeds of that are there for us to work on. And other ones need really just to be connected. So one of our key challenges is really around that furniture recovery market. So again, there have been seeds and people have tried stuff in the past, but unless you can work at a system level to really bring those pieces together and to bring the parties together in a timely fashion, you're not going to get the best out of it. So we've really had to take a systems level look at this, look at all of the materials, and then drill down and tackle them one by one. So when we started working in this space, we did some kind of benchmarking trials, and the industry recovery rate at that point was looking at 20%. And that was 18% recycled and 3% reuse. So clearly a substantial capacity for improvement. We set ourselves a target of 60% and a stretch target of 80%. A lot of the research tells us that international standards are up around the 80 to 90. Again, you need to interrogate, how much of that is C&D and how much is C&I. So there are some nuances in that. But there is absolutely no doubt that we can stretch and do substantially better than we are doing now. And our research shows that we can do this. So when we really started to put some effort into this and really manage on-site processes well and run some trials where we just sent a good signal to the demolition contractor to manage the site well, we could get our recovery, this is Governor Macquarie Tower, up to 60% recovery at no additional cost. That's literally just putting stuff into piles, planning your way through it, giving them sufficient access and time to get the materials off site, asking them to deconstruct with care rather than put a sledgehammer through stuff. And that was just part of the conversation, so it cost them nothing. But we think there's a lot further that we can go, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So we took those learnings and we wanted to make it super practical, because at the end of the day, you really just want a document that you can pick up and give to your building manager and say, if you follow these principles, then you can get this recovery outcome. So we've developed some strip-out waste guidelines. They're available on our website, which is betterbuildingspartnership.com.au. And they're really super practical how-to guide. So we provide procurement clauses that set really good incentive alignment between essentially between the building owner and their refurbishment contractors, who then sub out to a demolition contractor at the bottom of the food chain. A really clearly articulated waste management plan, and just really simple stuff like roles and responsibilities, so that actually, rather than setting some kind of wafty best endeavours to recover and then not nailing it, because that's where the thing cascades away. But if you actually just articulate that in a document, funnily enough, things happen. People are held responsible. So some really practical tools in that guide. The first version of that, we really focused, as I said, through those trials on on-site management practices and getting that right. But we also heard from demolition contractors who were working in that space, and they said, look, if you get the incentives right through the procurement process, you don't need to tell us how to make a pile of stuff. Like, we will solve that problem. So we're about to launch version 2 of this guide. It will go up in the middle of June. And really what we've done there is step back up into the procurement process and really look at aligning incentives. So, as I said before, when you procure, all of our BBP members have set a 60% recovery target and this aspirational 80, and that is clearly articulated in the documentation. However, it is important that you don't require that from your demolition contractor, because if you're still giving them 24 hours notice and you ask them to ink on something that says 60 to 80% recovery, they'll sign it. But it doesn't mean you're going to get the quality of the outcomes that we're all really seeking. So what we've done is ask them, when they evaluate the project, to set what they think is a viable recovery level, and then to provide reporting that holds them to account for the number that they have nominated in the knowledge of what your shared intention is. And so what that does is stop people from trying to game the system, and opens up a space for an honest conversation between the client and the contractor. Because if the contractor can get 40%, but if they had more space or more time or more whatever, and they feel able to have that conversation with the client, then you're in a really constructive place about how we can do that better together. And then the tools will also has the waste management plan, which is for providing the feedback and some requirement for obviously receipt provision, etc. And that work was done with Baker McKenzie, and we did quite an extensive consultation with the demolition contractor sector to make sure that that was really fit for purpose. So essentially the guide sets out the 10 steps to best practice, and I won't go through them in detail. But it's about setting a clear diversion target. It's about liberating the information early. Agree the make good, lock it away, then the risk and return belongs to the next person in the chain of custody, but they are still incentivized to get the best outcomes that they possibly can. Then manage your site well. Then at the back end of the process, it's just about closing the loop and having regular compliance checks and making sure that you're really clear about the information that's coming back so that you'll make better decisions the next time around. And of course, the final piece of the puzzle, and the piece that we have not cracked but we are all working on together, is really then driving that market for people to procure reused and refurbished material. We've heard that before. You have to create the market if you want this stuff to stick. So what we've done is remove the barriers, create a framework that enables, but it's still incumbent upon all of us to consider pre-used and refurbished goods before we go out and buy new. This is just a simple grab of the reporting framework, and this is not dissimilar to the work we did in operational waste. So the BBP has developed guidelines like this for the management of operational waste in commercial buildings, and that work has informed some of the work that neighbours have done in the reversioning of their tool. So they now have a reliable methodology to quantify data coming out of commercial buildings, and we're very happy to work with them on that process. And we have also worked through that model with Good Environmental Choice Australia, who have now codified the themes that you see in this sister guide for operational waste into what does great waste contractor who is aligned with my principles look like. So this work is following a similar pathway. It's a little less mature, but we are hoping that as it matures, that we will also hand that out to market to other people to manage it as a standard. We are not a standards agency. We exist to provide the practical tools to assist industry to make better informed decisions. And so the results so far are that 60% is viable It is achievable now, and it is something that we should all be aspiring to when we are refitting our commercial premises. The remaining piece that we have to solve is furniture. So cabinetry, loose furniture, engineered timbers, they're the place where we're putting our focus at the moment. Now, the positive side of that is that actually this should be the easier piece of the puzzle. So, and I'll talk a bit more about how we're tackling that challenge. So we've supported, with Blake and with the EPA support, over 15 refurbishments so far, and learned and documented from each one of those. Some of them have hit well in excess of the 60% target, but 60% is coming out at about our average. And we have recovered or prevented from going to landfill 8,000 tons of material. That's over a few years, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, but I think it's still a material number. And over 100 tons of furniture have been redistributed to community groups. This material that's coming out of offices could not be in better shape. You know, when it comes out, there are commercial kitchens, there are whiteboards, TVs, like stuff any normal person would have in their house in a heartbeat, and there is a lot of it. And so the need is to be able to take this up to scale. Anyone wants to come in and grab a table, but what we need is a solution where someone can take 400 of them and take it tomorrow. So we've done some of this stuff at the community thing, but also building the network to really build that scale, both nationally and on the international market, is key. So the next steps for us. So in this first section, we've been working with the downstream. So what's happening in this red section when the site is going from the builder to the demolisher, and how do we get those recovery pathways? But clearly, the major opportunity is in this upstream. And how do we get the inventory out, and how do we get that conversation starting early? Now, I fortunately also run another program which is called the City Switch Green Office Program, which operates nationally and works with commercial office tenants, so that's kind of convenient. And our next task is to really bring that conversation to them. But there is absolutely no doubt that those high quality rehoming outcomes need to come up the food chain into that demand space. And we've had lots of anecdotal evidence from tenant representatives who have worked with clients who are moving, and they set these, reasonably generous budgets when they move, and there's furniture catalogues, and it's all very glamorous, and people are choosing their amazing spaces. But even just by taking desks, reskinning them and refurbishing them, there are millions of dollars to be spent. And if you ask most average office worker whether this office desk that you've been given is different from this one, the architect might be able to tell the difference, but I don't think the average office worker would. And so there are substantial benefits for being able to just be a bit more sensible. You can keep that overall budget envelope, spend more on the lights, spend more on the finishes, but let's just not waste this amazing material. It's absolutely fit for purpose for the long haul. So we've worked with UNSW so sometimes when the material comes out, it does need to be ground up and turned into something new, and we've done some feasibility studies with UNSW, taking ground up engineers and making it into, and proving that it can be made into new business building materials, either for filler, but it's also got really good outdoor properties with a couple of additives. It's also fire retardant, and it's much less susceptible to the swelling than a standard MDF, so it's actually applicable for outdoor uses as well. And we've identified a whole heap of new partners to work with over the long haul as we start to build that ecosystem, and a whole bunch of intermediaries who want to help with creating great inventories and sharing that information out to the multiple partners who are interested in taking care of a piece of this puzzle. And so the next steps for us are updated guidelines. As I said, will be out next month, and we'll be celebrating those with a launch event. Just to clarify, that's the 13th of June, not the 12th. If anybody's in Sydney and would like to come and see me afterwards, we'd love to have you there. And we'll be doing a bit of an expo where we introduce everyone who's working in this space to everyone else. And so if you're a supplier, there'll be a really great opportunity to meet other people who can help build your business and build that recovery offering. And then we want to back that up with an industry directory. So we've also got a media partner that we're working with. So again, people who are working in that space can all be listed in one place so that we make this a really easy go-to resource for people who are starting to approach a refurbishment to get both the guide and a whole bunch of people who they can work with. So my work is focused in the city of Sydney, but those providers will obviously definitely work in the greater metro area. If you want to amplify that work anywhere else, again, come and have a conversation with me about it. And then the last piece of then we'll be doing a Circular Economy Manufacturers Forum. And then the last piece of the puzzle is really about building that technology platform that holds this together. So we'll be working with software providers this year to get the inventory out so that we can distribute it to many places, to Gumtree, to intranets, to other interested parties, to the charity sector, so that we can really take this and scale it up to the next level. So if you're interested in participating in the next stage of our journey, please do come and see me. We've got some good runs on the board and we're ready to run harder on this. Thanks.